So today we have planned to start our Big E exposure. How are you feeling?
Pretty anxious.
Yeah, that's pretty normal because we're asking you to do the thing that you've been avoiding doing that gives you a lot of anxiety for quite some time. And it would be pretty normal even if you kind of had urges to not come today. Maybe even turn and walk out the front door again. So well done for coming along. I know it can be a really big step to take.
Thank you.
But also demonstrates that you're willing and able to act against those anxious urges, which is really good for setting you up to do your exposure well. So today we'll have a chat about why we're doing exposure, so you kind of understand what we're looking for. And then we'll kind of plan out, we're going to do a few experiments with a couple of different sensations and figure out which ones are going to be the best ones for us to start with in terms of exposing you to the experiences associated with your panic attacks. Mm-hmm. And then we'll set you up for what you're going to do as homework this week and which sensations you're going to start your exposure homework on. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I know exposure is a really big word. You might have even had people talk to you about doing exposure. It might have even been that sense of, just kind of jump in the deep end. If you kind of just get in and do it, then you'll be okay. Mm-hmm. Have you had those kind of messages?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And what's your understanding of exposure and how it works?
Yeah, kind of exposing yourself to the thing that makes you anxious over and over again until doesn't make you as anxious anymore, hopefully.
Yeah, that's the aim. And if we do this correctly, we actually can get a lot of bang for our buck out of these exposure sessions as well, or exposure tasks as well. And this is for a couple of different reasons. So I'll talk you through kind of what the reasons are that we're doing the exposure and how we're expecting it to work. The first thing is what we call habituation. But this is just a really fancy word for basically decreasing the sensitivity of that fear response so it's not triggered quite so easily. Mm-hmm. And so how this works is, if you think about, if we have this kind of graph of this, over time, and this is how anxious we feel. And if we use maybe a different example like that dog phobia example, what happens is if we come across a dog unexpectedly, quite obviously, we get a really sudden, sharp increase in our anxiety. Mm-hmm. And at this point, that's when we kind of tune in. We're like, oh my gosh, feeling really anxious, mm-hmm. really freaking out. What's the urge that we have?
Run away.
Run away, yeah. And so that is part of this. Mm-hmm. So we get that really sudden drop of anxiety because we've gotten the heck out of there. We're no longer in danger. So this is what happens when we avoid or we escape. And when we have catastrophic interpretations about our anxiety, often what happens at this point is we go, if I don't get out of here, what do I think is going to keep happening?
It's going to get more and more and more anxious, yeah.
Yeah. And we think it's going to be so overwhelming, we might actually end up fainting or going crazy, losing control, those kind of things. So this is what happens kind of when we listen to the anxiety voice telling us to avoid or escape. But what we actually know is that if we can sit and tolerate the feelings of anxiety without re-triggering ourselves into thinking about the threat and maintaining that level of danger that we perceive, the body systems that operate and kind of manage the fight or flight response will actually kick in and help us calm down. Mm-hmm. So we know that the parasympathetic nervous system will kind of kick in and start to slowly bring our system back to kind of that regular level. And it doesn't happen straight away, of course. It would be lovely if it did. Yeah. It can take a bit of time, and that's why we might even find in the hours or even kind of the day after, we might feel a little bit more drained after we've had kind of a panic attack. Mm-hmm. But over time, we know that it does decrease. Okay, so what we're looking at with panic attacks is that if we can sit and tolerate that anxiety mm-hmm. and let it subside, we're actually going to be training our brain to realise that it's not such a catastrophe, that it doesn't actually go up here. Mm-hmm. And so the next time this happens and our anxiety gets triggered, so maybe the next time we come across a dog, anxiety might peak, but it might kind of peak a little bit lower mm-hmm. and it might come down a little bit faster. And then the next time we come across a dog, it will happen again. And the next time it might be here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when we expose ourselves repeatedly to the thing that we're concerned about, and we can kind of sit and let that parasympathetic nervous system kick in and bring that anxiety down again, let the symptoms fade away, our body habituates to that really well. And so then it actually starts learning that it doesn't need to kick in that fear response as heavily as it was before. And so we're kind of changing where that threshold is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. The other really cool thing that we get to do with exposure is challenge some of those catastrophic interpretations, if you can remember. That sense of, I'm going to faint, I might lose control, other people might judge me, I might go crazy. So at the moment, again, our brain is kind of going, that's what we're operating is the assumption. But we actually don't know, because we're not putting ourselves in those situations to find out whether it is true or not. So if we allow ourselves to do the exposure tasks, then it's going to give us the evidence one way or the other. So we'll actually know whether it is as catastrophic as our brain is telling us, or whether it might be a little bit different. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So with all of that in mind, what we're going to do